Welcome to the Unhinged.
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 The Unhinged Potty.
Welcome to the Unhinged Potty. This is your host, Rasi, and this week we are spilling the tea on sustainability, dissecting its gendered burdens, corporate greenwashing, and digging into why the ultra-rich need to take responsibility for trashing the planet. And with me today is John, my neighbor and sustainability consultant, author and accidental influencer, to share his insights and knowledge. Hi, John.
Howdy again, neighbor.
If you haven't already, please go listen to the previous 2 episodes, which are the first 2 parts of this discussion. We last covered how uneven the eco-burden is, touched on how powerful boycotting can be, and in this episode, we will examine if women are being set up for failure.
Had I said this to myself 5 years ago, I would have, totally been angry. But where you spend your money absolutely matters. Why it took me so long to realize this, as somebody who works with companies day in and day out, I kick myself in the ass every day for not realizing it earlier, but absolutely it's the only thing they listen to. If you don't buy from a company,
then it hurts.
Then it hurts them, and all of a sudden they're saying, oh, well, why didn't they do it? Let's change our ways. And that's the only thing that really, really works. There are always companies that will want to do the right thing. There are plenty of examples of ones doing the right thing. There's the laundry list of the typical suspects. Ben & Jerry's, Unilever, Patagonia, the ones we always hear about, right? They're doing good things. But for the rest of them, you got to hit them in the pocketbook. Boycotting works. We've seen that over the past year with Starbucks and McDonald's boycotting because of what's happening in the Middle East. Boycotting absolutely works. Whether a company will say, hey, we're changing our ways because you boycotted us, they're not going to do that. They'll wrap it in some other language, but
they're going to save face,
works.
and that's fine. We don't care.
And that's fine. The ends justify the means. Boycotting absolutely works.
If all of you take away nothing from today and this whole session, please take home this message. Boycotting works. It does make the companies and corporations stop, pay attention, and actually mend their ways.
But do it the right way. I don't mean to put a butt on things. Like, don't do it just because you think they're doing something wrong. Make sure you have a basis, absolutely, or else you're just gonna, like we talked about earlier with green hushing, scare them into a corner. We don't want to do that. We want the good companies to continue being good, if there is such a thing as a good company, and we want the bad ones to recognize their bad behavior when it happens.
That is very interesting, and it's good to hear. I know we've heard the success stories of people being so strong in driving this change as a mass, and it has led to change in how the companies operate too. But it's good to hear from a credible source that that's actually the case and it's reality. So do you also think the whole reason why the whole movement is driven towards largely women is to use them as a scapegoat? Hear me out. The parallel that I have is, how a lot of the times failing companies will hire women as CEOs because they're failing, so they need somebody to cop the fallout and to cop the blame. It's a glass cliff in this case. Do you think similar principle might be being applied in this situation too? Because a lot of the times you see, for example, influencing, and power is power, influence is influence, no matter how we want to slice it. A lot of the influencing industry, which is quite new, is dominated by women. Those being the stats, if women end up standing for sustainability, but then they can't be perfect. So if they're a fashion influencer about sustainability, tomorrow they buy something from Shein, they're gonna get called out. Do you think the fallout and the outrage is higher when women are imperfect at this? They don't have the luxury to be imperfectly doing this, even though it's reasonable.
I think that's a really fascinating question that I have not really considered before. The lens I would put on it to begin answering it would be to look at kind of sustainability leadership within companies. And as you're talking through that question, the name that comes to, actually the name doesn't come to mind because I can't remember her name, but it was the first chief sustainability officer in the world was a woman by the name of, I want to say Linda Reynolds, even though I think that's totally wrong. So she was a former EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, deputy director under the Bush administration.
Okay.
And DuPont, the big multinational petrochemical company, they created the position of the CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer, and brought her on. This was back in 2004. So it's a really relatively recent thing. Corporate sustainability is really recent.
Yeah.
The professionalization of sustainability is a very, very recent thing. It hasn't been around that long. So she was put in power in 2004. And I think, and very much extrapolating here, I don't know, but I would venture to guess that she was brought in as that scapegoat. Because DuPont, as a chemical company, is obviously very much going to have bad PR, especially when it comes to sustainability. They didn't have any metrics. They weren't doing enough at the time. So why wouldn't they bring in a woman to say, hey, you need to fix all these litany of problems that we have, or you're going to be on the chopping block? So I think it absolutely makes sense. And if we look at even today, most multinational companies, I would say about half of them, I think statistically, have some sort of a chief executive in charge of sustainability. They're not even a chief executive. They're sort of a high SVP level, right? So it's not even that important to most companies, even though they give it a chief title. Most of those are going to be women. I don't have the stats, but if I think through just my observation, I think through the faces and the names of the CSOs that I can see, there's about 183, which isn't a lot. I'm going to say, don't quote me on this, at least 80% are women. That's not saying they're all being scapegoated, right? Again, this is a traditionally a feminine profession, but yeah, I mean, why wouldn't they be? Like, you try not to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's not a conspiracy when you have evidence over history to back this up. So yeah, and
more under scrutiny. It's when you're a woman, somehow the expectation on you is different. As it is, we know women have a lower threshold to be considered a failure in professional settings too. You're held to much higher standards. So I feel like that might be connected.
It could be. And a footnote, Linda was very successful in the role. She actually shaped the future of CSOs and the profession in a lot of ways, because she forced DuPont, instead of just sitting back and being the scapegoat for the bad PR, she forced DuPont to actually create its sustainability programs and metrics that, again, not a perfect company because they operate in chemicals, but doing a lot better than had they not put her in there in the first place.
That is so fascinating. I had
never thought about it, but I'm going to look into it much more now.
That's food for thought for everybody. Then in that case, what examples have you seen in your experience so far where if women are leading the sustainability and climate movement in any capacity, where they still face a whole different set of barriers and much higher level of resistance or number of problems compared to if their male counterparts were leading that same role? If men wanted to lead that change, do you think it would be easier for them? I might be wrong. Maybe this is not gendered, but if you don't ask the question, you don't know. You don't investigate. Do you think it becomes an issue that it's coming from a woman and people don't want to hear it because she's talking from emotional standpoint? Or
yes, so part of the role, one of the biggest parts of the role of a sustainability professional, especially as you get to the higher echelon of a business, is to be the engager of different stakeholders, to be able to tell the story, to be an activist, even though I don't like using that word, but to be an activist in a way that's going to galvanize support from within the business towards whatever ends you're going to. That's not an easy thing to do. And so the opportunity for naysayers, and there's plenty of them within a business, to say, oh, you're just being emotional about this, or this is an emotional issue, is always going to be ever present. I think there are many things that are really getting sustainability professionals right now banging their head against a wall in terms of making progress. And a big part of that is resourcing. Let's be honest and put our cards on the table that when it comes to demanding resourcing from within a traditional business, women are going to have a much harder time getting those resources.
That's very true.
So I'm sure there are stats about that all over the place. But if you have women in charge of sustainability and we know that they're complaining about resourcing, I think it's something on the order of 90% of sustainability professionals, when polled back in 2024, said they do not have the resources to be successful. 90%. And if you then start to piece things together and say, okay, the majority of us in the field are women don't have access to resources to be successful, it's it's too high. It should be it's much more concerning than it is, that 90% do not think they're going to be successful in their jobs because they lack the resources, whether that's financial, say-so power, personnel, all these sorts of things, or even a brain drain of people leaving because they're apathetic and they're over this because we push shit uphill every day. It's not an easy profession.
Tech.
Or tech as well. All these things playing a part are going to add up into the whole, right? So it makes sense. Are women being scapegoated? I'm not entirely sure, but there's absolutely a gender lens.
Looking suspicious.
It's looking suspicious, and there's absolutely a gender lens to the profession as much as there is to sustainability writ large.
It continues to be the case that the women will dominate the climate action and sustainability initiative at the grassroots, but older men will continue to dominate the fossil fuel boards and environmental policy. That doesn't seem to be the place where they want to put women. They want to put them in the laborious parts where they will constantly face backlash and roadblocks and disappointments and exhaustion, and be coming face to face with the life consequences of the awful effects that climate change or non-sustainable actions have. But God forbid you put them in the actual spaces where decision making is happening, isn't it?
And it's the same across, certainly, like you said, environmental policy is part of that at a national and an international level. It's primarily from men. We look at the picture from COP last year. COP is the UN annual climate conference.
Yeah.
They take that fun photo with all the the heads of state or the heads of delegation that are there. Last year, I think there were 5 women out of the 194 people there. Like, obviously that's clearly an issue, but it's been that way sort of for several years. So how, if women are half the population, and as we've talked about, they're really affected by this more than men, and they're an infinitesimally small number of the delegates forming the policy, obviously a major issue. You look at any board of directors for any company, and you're just going to be shocked by how many pale male stale men sit on those boards versus people of color or women or marginalized communities. Never happens. And it's absolutely shocking. And when it does happen, they're in the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion. They will be in an HR function, or they'll be the CSO, this chief sustainability officer. But you sort of, before you even click on the webpage for these boards of directors, you already know what it's going to look like and who's going to be sitting in what position. And it's just part and parcel of the system that exists.
Well, are we even surprised that women are not being invited to these spaces? Because look at what happened when they were discussing reproductive rights. There was no woman there. If it didn't occur to you to talk about reproductive rights with at least one woman present, then it sure as hell is not going to occur to you when you're having these other conversations. Because, nuance who? Impact who?
And then when that happens, you formulate policy and practices and procedures that not discount but dismiss half the population. And so that's not a solution. When the solution doesn't impact everybody, it's not a solution.
And it's not going to be sustainable.
No.
In other sense of the word either. So then you did already mention, but if I had to summarize, I would say the climate crisis and the need for things to be more sustainable, it would expose the deeper power imbalance in regards to how there's an issue when you bring gender into the conversations, yes, but also race, class, socioeconomic status, like you said.
The intersectionality of sustainability, intersectionality being how all the pieces of society work together, is something that we don't talk about nearly enough, even within the field. And it was very apparent with Greta Thunberg going to Palestine and talking about Palestine over the past year, and people telling her, stop talking about politics, you're supposed to be talking about environment. And that didn't come from an ignorant, general public, no offense to the general public. That was coming from people inside the sustainability profession as well, and how they could not see that all sustainability is political was mind-boggling to me, because we started as a political movement, we continue as a political movement. Everything about sustainability is absolutely political.
funny how everything is political, but it's not seen as such when you want to make an empathetic point or to make a very strong point. But everything does end up being political when they want to use it against you.
Oh, 100%.
When they want to implicate you as being offensive to the government or whatever, when they want to strip you of your job or your privilege or whatever, that's when they'll say this was political. They'll go out of their way to extrapolate that meaning into somehow being political. The joys of being the intellectual and seeing the real things and being a woman and being aware. Fun. We talked a lot about the gender and its role and gender takes on sustainability, and that was fascinating. In the next one, we'll be talking about class, privilege, and the price of doing the right thing. So please stay tuned, and as always, please show love and engage. Thank you so much for that, John. It was amazing he came from downstairs to upstairs. This was so fun. I love it. I love it. And that was the Unhinged Potty episode for today. I hope you enjoyed. Reach out to us at the Unhinged Potty on our socials. Give me your feedback, suggestions. Tell me what you would like me to talk about next. Until then, bye.
The Unhinged Potty.